All right, and we're live. Really exciting episode today. I'm Wyatt. I'm the co founder of Female Founder Collective. We are a platform for empowering and educating female founders, which today Randi Zuckerberg is also doing the same, but in a different way. So I'm excited to get into that. But first, quickly, a reminder we have the 10th house, which is our private membership community for founders to find each other by stage, by industry, by geography, by whether or not they're venture backed, so that you can find each other. You can find incredible resources. We do programming like this in just a bit after we get this incredible fireside chat done with Randi. She's actually going to be going into our community and addressing specific questions, which there are many that our founders have as to how the world of Web3 applies to them in their business. But I am very excited to go through Randi's extraordinary bio. And so I'm going to read that, and then we are going to go right into questions because I have many for her. Randi has always believed that the world is better when technology and the arts come together. I agree. She left a successful career in Silicon Valley to star in Rock of Ages on Broadway, which I had no idea. And I read this and my mind was blown. Since then, she has won 3 Tony Awards and returned to her tech roots as an advisor, investor, and board member, making her one of the only leaders in Web3 space to have expertise and credibility in both groundbreaking technology as well as the creative arts. And really, Web3 is this incredible intersection of the two. She believes the new breed of Web3 leaders are a new type of entrepreneur who is fearless in leading through both art and technology, and through her experience on the ground floor of Web2, as well as her expertise leading commercially successful artistic projects, she can't wait to help grow the next crop of billion-dollar brands that nurture both of these worlds. Love it. So Randi, when one looks you up on Crunchbase, when one hears your extraordinary bio, which is a very truncated view of all of the things that you do. You have 4 jobs that show up: partner at Surround Ventures, founder and CEO of Zuckerberg Media, investor at Brit & Co., and you used to be a director in market development and growth at Facebook, now Meta, of course. And you also, as we've just learned, were on Broadway and even won a Tony. So it's not like you were like mediocre at that. So lesson learned, is there anything you can't do? But truly is the first question, how do you do it all for those of us that are women, that are founders, that are trying to balance it all? And I know that you obviously have advice based off of your best-selling book that you wrote as well. So I'm going to kick off that way before we go deep into the world of Web3.
Oh, thank you so much for a lovely introduction. And right back at you for all the amazing things that you do to empower women and give people a voice. I can't cook to save my life. I've tried.
Thankfully, there's one thing she can't do.
People I love have been like, please don't cook for us. I've always had this kind of split identity where I've been kind of half techie and half artist. And I spent 20 years keeping those 2 parts of my identity separate because there was nowhere to put both of them.
Yeah.
And I was always a little too artsy for the tech world. People could not understand why I had this burning passion to sing on Broadway after like going through an IPO in tech. And in the arts world, they couldn't really understand, like, was I a real artist if I also like had a day job in tech? Did I? And so I just spent 20 years navigating these 2 worlds, not really feeling like I was part of either of them. And then during the pandemic, that's really, even though it was such a terrible time for theater and for the live arts, that's really when everything started to make sense for me, because for the first time, these 2 worlds started coming together around NFTs, streaming video, and really amazing new platforms for artists to go direct to their community. So it has taken 20 years for my career to finally make sense.
Well, it certainly does make sense. And I remember like when NFTs first came out and I had no idea what they meant. I just knew that they were the next big thing. but as early as I heard it, your name was attached to it. So can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up sort of starting off into the Web3 world, and why specifically NFTs? And then I want to get into obviously Hug and what that is.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to start by saying that we're so early. And so, what NFTs look like today is not what they will look like in the future. We might not even use the word NFTs in the future. So,
Yeah.
um, for anyone out there who feels skeptical or doesn't quite understand what they are, it's okay to have all of those feelings because we're so early. But what I would urge everyone to do is before you form a definitive viewpoint of saying, like, I don't like NFTs, or I do, or I'm going to buy them, or I'm not, just do some research. Just spend some
Yeah.
time immersing yourself in the world. I'm glad I did because it completely changed my own perspective of the space to do that. For me, the reason I got excited about NFTs was it was a convergence of a lot of things that were happening at the same time. During the pandemic, women stopped
Yeah.
getting funded in their businesses. As you know, we took a back seat almost to the 1950s of the level of number of women in roles and financing for women-led startups. So a lot of progress that so many of us fought for on the front lines of Web 2 was completely eliminated overnight. And likewise with artists, I saw just entire industries dry up overnight. The entire Broadway theatrical industry that makes, close to $5 billion a year dried up overnight. And so those two big issues were in my mind, and I started thinking, if only there was a way for creative professionals, especially women, to not have their careers subject to all these external forces and to be able to go direct to their audience, to raise money, to put their art out there, to not be beholden to all of these middlemen and gatekeepers. And for me, that's when I started to get really excited about the promise of NFTs.
Yeah.
For me, it's not about like trading digital monkeys and if you can flip things and like buy something for $100 and flip it for $103. Like, no, for me, it's always been about giving a voice to artists and giving women a new way to raise money. And I think that NFTs unlock an entire new universe of potential there.
I agree. And on the back of that, in order to empower more creatives, you've recently launched Hug, HUG, a platform for NFT creators and Web3 businesses. Can you speak to the why behind it and tell us a little bit more about what it is and maybe some of the programs that you offer through that?
Sure. I like to say that Hug is the friendliest second stop on someone's Web3 journey because there are a lot of amazing communities out there that will onboard total newcomers. So if you need to learn what an NFT is, if you need to set up a crypto wallet for the first time, there's incredible communities like BFF, like Curious Addies that specialize in taking complete newcomers and onboarding them into the world. But what I realized is that a lot of people they get to the on ramp of the highway and then they're kind of like, now what? Because
Yeah, what do I do?
once you get into the Web3 world, it moves so fast and it's almost a choose your own adventure. Some people become investors in the space. Some people will start their own NFT collections. Some people will become founders. And if you're just kind of left at the on ramp to the highway, then you can never really pick a lane. So at Hug, we are a community of people who have onboarded into Web3 and are now choosing their own adventure and picking what lane they're just going to go fast in Web3. So we provide the tools to do that. We're kind of like the sorting hat from Harry Potter. We're like, okay, you're a curator, you're a creator. And then we really help people move fast. And we do that through a few things. We have an incubator program where for creators, where we're now currently working with more than 20 different NFT projects from kind of day
Wow.
one through to mint. We are creating this kind of Yelp-like review system for NFTs and
Amazing.
Web3, so that in the future, if you need information on an NFT project, you can see what 3,000 other women and diverse founders in the space have said about those collections and how we vetted them. So there's a lot of projects that are happening in our community, but all of them are people who have onboarded and then like super leaned into the Web3 space.
And Randy, I feel like you talked a little bit right now just about the types of ways that you can get involved. And I think there's a lot of intimidation, right, around what is my place in the Web3 space? And should I even get involved at all? If I'm not a creator, perhaps, but I appreciate art, what could my role be? Or, like you said, you don't necessarily have to trade at a high volume, but you can appreciate and perhaps collect. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about the different types of sort of stakeholders or participants you see out there, and so that as people are listening, they can sort of think of what is my role going to be?
Totally. And you raise a great point that so many people feel so intimidated by the space. And it is intimidating. Web3
Mhm.
has its own vocabulary. It seems like people are speaking another language.
Places.
It's moving so quickly. You go have
Yeah.
lunch and you come back, and like the entire industry has changed. And so that's why we called our community Hug, is because we wanted it to feel friendly and embracing.
Yeah.
And so, for example, one of the first things that people, newcomers into our community, get asked to do is they get a list of 10 NFT projects and are asked to go check out those projects and review them. And here's our criteria, so that it just kind of shows you right away that there's a place for everyone in Web3 and there's important roles. So a lot of the people in our community identify as curators. And that's not even really a role that existed until a few years ago. But there's an entire need for a layer of expertise over Web3 to kind of curate the noise and to pick the best of the best of Web3. And so that's a whole role that's emerging in Web3, that even if you don't want to ever create your own NFT project, you never want to found your own company, maybe you never even want to purchase a single cryptocurrency in your life, you can still have an incredibly meaningful career and place in the space in that curator layer. So I think there are so many exciting ways to get involved with Web3 that don't even involve spending any money.
Yeah.
What I do know is that the careers that we will all have in the future will require these skill sets. And so I personally will eat the desk that I'm sitting at right now if women miss out on acquiring those skill sets and miss out on entire other technical revolution.
So interesting. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Web 2 in the world that, we've been living in, and our future in Web 3. We actually recently had a friend of yours on, and I think you've been very involved, but Michelle Reeves,
Yay.
yeah, joined us, and she was incredibly helpful in educating us all on Web3 and some of the, like you said, the vocabulary behind it. Can you give your definition of what sort of differentiates Web 2 versus Web 3, and why you think it's so integral that we all learn some of the skill sets that are going to be necessary in going into Web 3? Because it does feel very niche right now still, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I think and it's funny to say this because with Web 2, I was like the 25-year-old kid going into Web
Right?
2. Now I'm like the adult. I'm the adult in the room for Web 3, and which is scary when I'm the adult in the
I had
room.
the same thing, Randy. I was saying, I was like, remember when we were like the experts in the internet,
Yeah,
And I was like, I
totally.
was young and cool then.
Yes, totally. And so I think what defined Web 2 was it added a people layer over the
Yeah.
internet. So we had what was called the social graph. And when you took a website of just plain information and you added a social graph onto it, you suddenly added this whole new layer to the internet where people could review things, you could connect, you could message people. It kind of added this personal touch to information. And that was really a revolution, putting the
Yeah.
social graph over content. Web3 is about putting kind of an ownership graph over all of that. So with Web 2, the limitation is that you could do all of these amazing things, connect with other people, but you don't own what you're creating on those sites. They're still owned by another company. That company could change their algorithm, that company corrupt, that company could sell, they could do anything, and you have no control over any of that. So Web3 is about putting an ownership layer over all of that so that no matter what you do, you own what you're creating. You can take it with you. You can do whatever you want with that ownership. And so your wallet, your crypto wallet, is kind of the keys to the kingdom in the ownership economy, whereas the social graph were the keys to the kingdom in Web 2. So I think that's the biggest difference that I'm seeing. And for any creator, anyone out there who has spent time over the last several years building up a community and a following and an audience and a content, like, now is the time to own that. And it's a really exciting time to be a creator.
So let's talk about applications on that note, because I think a lot of people think that Web3 equals NFTs, right? And NFTs are one product. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about the products, but also that you don't have to be a digital image creator or artist in order to be a creator in it. Can you talk about, like, maybe if I
Yeah.
have a fashion business or I'm a musician, ways in which Web3 might apply?
Absolutely. So, and I think I'm glad you said that. I love focusing on NFTs because I think NFTs are a great first step into crypto for newcomers, because it can get really complicated to understand what's going on with all of these decentralized finance apps and all of these currencies and staking and what's happening. But I feel like
Yeah.
all of us can understand buying art online
Yeah.
and supporting e-commerce. And
Yeah.
so I have found that NFTs are a really great on-ramp into crypto. It's not the be all and end all. It's not the only
Yeah.
thing to do in Web3, but it's a great first thing to do. Um, you might hear when people are talking about Web3, a lot of people are talking about the metaverse and what we're going to be doing in virtual reality and augmented reality. There's a lot of people that are talking about different currencies and altcoins and trading things. So there's a lot of corners of this room of Web3 that you could play in. But you asked for kind of a specific example. So I'm going to give the example of a restaurant in New York City called the Fly Fish Club. This restaurant, if you want to get into it, you need an NFT. And this restaurant sold, let's say, I think it was about 500 NFTs to be members of the restaurant. So, you know, today, that's not new behavior. Today, you could
Yeah.
join Soho House in New York City or LA. You could join any number of social clubs or country clubs or things. But when you move, like when you leave New York or you decide you've aged out of being in some of these social clubs or things like that, well, they just say bye, and that was a sunk cost of all of the years of membership. But with Flyfish, when you move cities, you can actually put that NFT up back on the market again, and you might actually make money or get your money back that you paid for that
Yeah.
membership because you own that membership. You're not just renting it. You're not just
Yeah.
and so I think it completely changes the way that we're going to see people join membership clubs, invest in businesses. So that's not digital art. You're not like displaying that membership anywhere, but it is completely changing the way that people engage with organizations.
It's amazing. And you also have, like you said, the ability to resell it. And you would never otherwise be able to look at that as a recoupable
Correct.
investment, as you will. Um, and as sort of a first step into this world, so say, it's day one, I've decided I'm going to invest time in getting into Web3. Do you have any recommendations for people? It's like, what is that first thing I'm going to do to get involved?
Yes. Well, the first thing I always recommend is spend a lot of time immersing yourself in Web3 before you ever open up your wallet.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot to learn. It's important to feel comfortable. When I see people rush into the space, I worry for them because
Yeah.
it's exciting, but it's a rough neighborhood. I mean,
Yeah.
think of like the sketchiest neighborhood you've wound up in at 3 o'clock in the morning after a party, and like,
Lots of robbers.
yeah, and like Web3 is sketchier than whatever you can imagine. So there's a lot of fun, amazing things going on, but like it's the Wild West, and there's a lot
Lawless.
of like bandits out there too.
Right. Right.
So so that's why I think the best first step is to kind of come in slowly, get the lay of the land, figure out which communities. I recommend picking 2 or 3 communities that you really want to go deep in and understand. And then after you've put a few weeks of time into kind of just feeling comfortable in the space, then go ahead and open a wallet, or collect an NFT, or do some trading. But this is definitely not an area that you want to rush in without understanding. Otherwise, you can get really taken advantage of. And that's really one of the downsides to the space. I think it's important to understand the pros and the cons. And the downside to the space is that the user experience is not really ready for mainstream
Right.
activity yet. It's not safe enough. And it does break my heart when people come into the space, have a bad experience, and then kind of who knows if they'll ever return to the space.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's the Wild West, and we're commercializing and trying to streamline everything. But this is super helpful. We're going to learn a lot more from you inside of 10th House. But in the meantime, I always end this with one of your best pieces of advice that you sort of live by, either given to you by someone else in your world, but something that helps you navigate your journey as a founder, an executive, an extraordinary businesswoman.
Well, thank you for saying that. I once had a mentor really early in my career tell me to be less interesting. And I know, I mean, that sounds like a terrible thing to say. I know they had the best intentions at heart when they said that. And what they meant by that is that as a woman, it can be really hard to be taken seriously in business if you're seen as being distracted or having a lot of interests, or having your hand
Yeah.
in a lot of things. So they told me if I wanted to be successful in business, that I should be less interesting. I'm really glad I didn't take that advice. When I went to sing on Broadway, I had a lot of people who told me I'd probably never sit on a board again, or I'd never raise money again, because who would believe in someone who left a career to go sing. But I think that being well-rounded and being a three-dimensional person is actually the strongest skills that you can have in business, and the most unique asset that you can bring to the table. So the worst advice maybe the worst advice I got, but it turned out to be kind of something that I've carried with me to this day as my own personal belief system. So I really hope that anyone out there who's listening, if there's something about you that you have traditionally felt has held you back in your career, that actually might be your secret weapon going into
Oh,
Web3.
I love that. I love that so much. And it kind of relates to Eve Rodsky's Unicorn Space. I don't know if you've read that one.
No, I haven't, but it
He
sounds like I
talks
need
about
to.
how you have to incorporate your creative endeavors, for example, into your world and make space for them. And who knows, they might end up being your superpower and your ultimate career trajectory. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your time so generously and your knowledge. And where can they find you, basically? Also, I meant to add that.
Yes.
You personally, and then Hug.
Thank you. Me personally, I am spending a lot of time on Twitter these days. That's where all the crypto activity is happening, at Randi Zuckerberg. But I'm also on LinkedIn a lot, and on Facebook and Instagram, of course. You can find all information about Hug at thehug.xyz. And I would really encourage anyone to come see what we're up to in our community with curating, or apply for one of our incubators. We really are a very friendly community to take that next step in Web3.
Love it. I'm going to do it myself too. Thanks, Randi. See you shortly.
Thanks.